Maya Singh had always been invisible. Not literally, of course, but in every way that mattered in her small hometown of Riverside. She walked through the crowded hallways of her high school like a ghost, her worn sneakers making no sound on the polished floors. Students pushed past her without a glance. Teachers called roll without really seeing her raise her hand, and even her own family seemed to forget she existed most days. At 17, Maya had learned to make herself small. Her clothes were always a size too big, hand-me-downs from her older sister Priya, who had left for college 2 years ago and never looked back. Her long black hair hung like a curtain around her face, hiding the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes. She carried her books clutched against her chest like armor, protecting herself from a world that had made it clear she didn't belong. The Singh family had moved to Riverside when Maya was 12, after her father lost his job at the tech company in the city. Her mother, Kavya, had found work as a night shift nurse at the local hospital, while her father, Raj, took whatever construction jobs he could find. They lived in a small apartment above Mrs. Chin's grocery store, the walls thin enough that Maya could hear every argument her parents tried to keep quiet. Money was always tight. Maya watched her mother count and recount the same crumpled bills at the kitchen table, her face drawn with worry lines that seemed to deepen each month. She saw her father's shoulders sag a little more each time he came home without work. And she understood, without anyone having to tell her, that dreams were luxuries they couldn't afford. At school, Maya was the girl who ate lunch alone in the library, who never spoke unless directly asked a question, who disappeared into the background so completely that her yearbook photo looked like a mistake. Her teachers knew she was smart. Her test scores were always near the top, but she never volunteered answers, never asked for help, never caused any trouble. She was the perfect invisible student. The other kids had their cliques, their after-school activities, their weekend plans. Maya had her books and her sketches. She filled notebook after notebook with drawings of places she'd never been and people she'd never meet. Sometimes she drew herself with different clothes, different hair, a different life entirely. But those notebooks stayed hidden under her mattress like everything else that mattered to her. Her sister Priya had been the golden child, beautiful, confident, with grades good enough to earn a scholarship to a university 3 states away. Priya had been everything their parents wanted, successful, ambitious, destined for something better than Riverside. When she left, she took all their hopes with her, leaving Maya to exist in her shadow. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" her mother would ask during their rare conversations. Priya knew how to make friends, how to stand up for herself. She made something of her life. Maya never had an answer. How could she explain that she'd tried to be like Priya once? That she'd raised her hand in class and been ignored, had attempted to join conversations only to watch them die in uncomfortable silence, had shown up to school events where she stood alone until she finally gave up and went home? How could she tell her mother that being invisible felt safer than being seen and rejected? The kids at school weren't cruel, exactly. They weren't bullies who actively tormented her. They simply acted as if she didn't exist, which somehow felt worse. She was the girl whose name they couldn't remember, whose desk they looked right through, whose presence registered no more than a piece of furniture. Even when she was assigned to group projects, her classmates would divide up the work among themselves and leave her to figure out what was left. Maya learned to live in her own world. She created elaborate stories in her head about the life she might have lived in a different place, with different parents, with a different face in the mirror. She imagined herself confident and outspoken, surrounded by friends who valued her thoughts and opinions. But these fantasies only made the reality of her situation more painful. Her refuge was the town library, a small brick building 2 blocks from school. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Patterson, was one of the few adults who seemed to actually see Maya. She would recommend books, ask about her reading preferences, and sometimes they would have long conversations about stories and characters. In a library, surrounded by thousands of other worlds, Maya felt less alone. It was in the library that Maya first learned about the military. She'd been reading everything she could get her hands on: fiction, nonfiction, biographies, history. A book about women in combat caught her attention, and she found herself fascinated by stories of female soldiers who had overcome impossible odds, who had proven themselves in a world that didn't want them. She read about pilots and mechanics, about medics and intelligence officers, about women who had found purpose and respect in military service. For the first time, Maya began to imagine a future for herself that didn't involve disappearing entirely. She pictured herself in uniform, part of something bigger than herself, finally belonging somewhere. But even this dream felt impossible. How could someone like her, quiet, overlooked, unremarkable, ever become a soldier? The military required confidence, leadership, physical strength. All the things Maya was sure she lacked. Still, she couldn't stop reading about it, couldn't stop imagining what it might feel like to be part of something that mattered. Her parents never asked about her interests or her future plans. They were too busy working multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. Her mother pulled double shifts at the hospital whenever she could, coming home exhausted and irritable. Her father took whatever construction work he could find, his hands growing more calloused, and his back more bent with each passing month. Maya tried to help by getting a part-time job at Mrs. Chen's store, stocking shelves and working the register after school. The work was mindless, but it gave her something to do and a small paycheck to contribute to the household expenses. Mrs. Chen was kind to her, speaking in a mixture of English and Mandarin that Maya had learned to understand over the years. "You're a good girl," Mrs. Chen would say, patting Maya's shoulder with her weathered hand. "Smart girl. You'll find your way." But Maya wasn't so sure. Every day felt the same. Wake up, go to school, be invisible, work at the store, go home, do homework, sleep, repeat. She was trapped in a life that felt like it was happening to someone else, watching from the sidelines as time passed by without her. Her 18th birthday came and went without celebration. Her parents gave her a card with $20 inside and apologized for not being able to do more. Priya called from college, their conversation lasting exactly 4 minutes before she had to rush off to some social event. Maya spent the evening in her room, looking at her collection of library books about military service and wondering if she would ever be brave enough to try. The thought of enlisting terrified her. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if she couldn't handle the physical demands? What if the other recruits treated her the same way her classmates did, like she didn't exist? But the alternative, staying in Riverside, working at the store, living the same invisible life forever, terrified her even more. Maya began to research military careers more seriously. She learned about different branches of service, different job specialties, different ways to serve. She discovered that the military valued intelligence and dedication as much as physical strength, that there were roles for people with different skills and backgrounds. For the first time, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find a place where she belonged. The idea grew stronger as graduation approached. While her classmates made plans for college or local jobs, Maya filled out preliminary paperwork for military recruitment. She didn't tell her parents. She wasn't ready for that conversation yet, but she began to think seriously about what it would mean to leave everything behind and start over. One evening, as she was closing the store, Mrs. Chun noticed Maya reading a military recruitment brochure. "You thinking about joining the army?" the older woman asked, her accent thick but her English clear. Maya nodded, embarrassed to be caught dreaming. "My nephew, he was in the army," Mrs. Chun continued, organizing the cash register. "Good experience for him. Taught him discipline, gave him direction, made him strong." She paused, studying Maya's face. "You already strong, just don't know it yet." Those words stayed with Maya as she walked home that night. Strong. It wasn't a word she'd ever used to describe herself. But maybe Mrs. Chun saw something Maya couldn't see. Just like the women in the books she'd read had found strength they didn't know they possessed. As summer approached and graduation loomed, Maya found herself standing at a crossroads. She could stay in Riverside, accept the life that had been laid out for her, and continue to exist in the margins. Or she could take a leap of faith and see if the military might offer her the chance to become someone new, someone who mattered, someone who was seen, someone who belonged. The decision felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. Maya Singh had spent her entire life being invisible, overlooked, forgotten. But somewhere deep inside, a small flame of hope had been growing. Maybe it was time to see if that flame could become something bigger, something brighter, something that could light her way to a different future. The recruitment office was only 20 minutes away by bus. Maya had walked past it dozens of times, always slowing down to look at the posters in the window, but never finding the courage to go inside. Now, with graduation only weeks away, she knew she had to make a choice. She could keep dreaming, or she could take the first step toward making those dreams real. For someone who had spent her whole life in the shadows, stepping into the light felt like the scariest thing in the world. But staying in the darkness felt even worse. Maya Singh was tired of being invisible. She was ready to find out who she might become if someone finally took the time to see her. The bus ride to the recruitment office felt like the longest 20 minutes of Maya's life. She had changed clothes 3 times that morning, settling on a simple blue sweater and her least worn pair of jeans. Her hands shook as she clutched the folder containing her high school transcripts and the paperwork she had secretly filled out over the past weeks. The recruitment center was housed in a strip mall between a pizza place and a dry cleaner. The American flag hanging outside fluttered in the morning breeze, and Maya paused at the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the glass, she could see posters of smiling soldiers and motivational slogans. This was it, the moment that would change everything or confirm that she was just fooling herself. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez looked up from his desk as Maya entered, his kind eyes taking in her nervous posture and the way she hesitated by the door. He was a compact man in his 30s with graying temples and smile lines that suggested he laughed often. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice gentle but professional. I want to learn about enlisting," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Have a seat," Rodriguez said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "What's your name?" "Maya Singh." "Well, Maya, what brings you in today? What's got you interested in military service?" The question she had been preparing for suddenly felt impossible to answer. How could she explain the years of invisibility, the desperate need to belong somewhere, the hope that the military might give her a purpose? Instead, she said, "I want to serve my country. I want to do something that matters." Rodriguez nodded, apparently used to nervous recruits struggling to articulate their motivations. He spent the next hour walking Maya through the basics, different branches of service, job specialties, educational benefits, training requirements. Maya listened intently, taking notes in her careful handwriting. "Your test scores are impressive," Rodriguez said, reviewing the paperwork Maya had brought. "With grades like these, you'd qualify for almost any military occupational specialty. Have you thought about what kind of work interests you?" Maya had thought about little else for months. "Intelligence," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I want to work in military intelligence." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "That's a competitive field. Requires security clearance, extensive background checks, additional training. But with your academic record," he studied her for a moment, "you seem like a smart young woman. Quiet, but there's something determined about you. Intelligence work might be a good fit." They talked for another hour about the enlistment process, basic training, and what Maya could expect. Rodriguez was patient with her questions, never making her feel stupid for not knowing military terminology or procedures. When she finally left the office, Maya carried a stack of informational packets and a date for the Military Entrance Processing Station, MEPS, where she would take her aptitude tests and physical examination. The hardest part was telling her parents. Maya waited until dinner, when all 3 of them were together for once. Her father had managed to find steady work with a construction crew, and her mother had just finished a day's shift instead of her usual nights. The timing felt as good as it would ever get. "I've decided to enlist in the army," Maya said, setting down her fork and looking directly at her parents. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Her mother's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and, finally, something that might have been fear. "Enlisting," Raj said finally. "Maya, you going to college. You have good grades. There's no need to— With what money?" Maya interrupted, louder than she had ever spoken to her parents. "We can't afford college. You know that. I know that. This isn't a last resort. It's a choice I'm making. The military is dangerous," Kavya said, her voice tight. "People get hurt. People die. And you're not built for that kind of life." The word stung because Maya had thought the same thing countless times. But hearing it from her mother crystallized something inside her. She wasn't built for military life, according to whom? She had never been given the chance to find out what she was capable of. "I've already talked to a recruiter," Maya said. "I'm taking my aptitude tests next week. I want to work in intelligence." "Intelligence?" Raj laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Maya, you barely speak to anyone. How are you going to work in intelligence? How are you going to survive basic training?" "Maybe that's something I need to find out for myself," Maya said quietly. The argument that followed was the longest conversation Maya had ever had with her parents. They worried about her safety, her ability to handle the physical and mental demands of military life, and what people in their community would think. None of their concerns were about what Maya wanted or what might be best for her future. "Priya is doing so well in college," Kavya said finally. "She's studying business, making good grades, meeting the right kind of people. Why can't you follow her example?" "Because I'm not Priya," Maya said, standing up from the table. "I never have been, and I never will be. This is my decision." She went to her room and closed the door, listening to her parents' muffled voices discussing her future as if she weren't there. It was exactly what she had expected, but it still hurt. Even when she was trying to take control of her life, she remained invisible to the people who were supposed to know her best. The week leading up to MEPS passed in a blur of nervous energy and second-guessing. Maya went through the motions at school and work, but her mind was always elsewhere. She read everything she could find about basic training, military life, and intelligence work. She started running in the mornings, trying to prepare herself physically for what was coming. Mrs. Chin noticed the change immediately. "You look different," she observed one afternoon as Maya stocked shelves. "More awake." "I'm joining the army," Maya said, testing how the words sounded out loud. "Good," Mrs. Chun said without hesitation. "Good for you. Sometimes we have to leave everything behind to find out who we really are." MEPS was held in a large government building an hour's drive from Riverside. Maya took the bus, arriving early and sitting in the waiting room surrounded by other young people who looked just as nervous as she felt. Some were chatty and confident, already talking about their future military careers. Others, like Maya, sat quietly and tried to calm their racing hearts. The day was a series of tests and examinations. Maya took the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, a comprehensive test that would determine what job she qualified for. She had always been good at standardized tests, and this one felt familiar despite the military context. Math, reading comprehension, logical reasoning, subjects where she could disappear into her own analytical mind. The physical examination was more challenging. Maya had never been athletic, and she worried that her small frame and lack of experience with sports would disqualify her. But the doctors seemed more concerned with overall health than peak physical condition. She passed everything, though just barely on the physical fitness requirements. When the results came back, Maya stared at the scores in disbelief. She had qualified for every intelligence specialty the Army offered, with test scores in the top 10%. The guidance counselor, a Navy petty officer with kind eyes, walked through her options. "With scores like these, you could do anything," he said. "Military intelligence, signals intelligence, even some classified specialties I can't discuss without additional security clearance. What interests you most?" Maya found herself drawn to signals intelligence, the interception and analysis of communications. It sounded like detective work, using technology and analytical skills to solve puzzles that could make a difference in the world. It was perfect for someone who had spent her life observing from the sidelines, noticing things other people missed. The security clearance process would be extensive, requiring background interviews with people who knew her. Maya almost laughed at that. Who would they interview? Mrs. Chun? Mrs. Patterson from the library? The list of people who really knew Maya Singh was remarkably short. She signed the papers that day, committing to 8 years of service, for active duty, for reserves. Her ship date for basic training was set for 3 months away, giving her time to graduate and prepare. As she rode the bus home, Maya felt something she had never experienced before: anticipation for her future. The news of Maya's enlistment spread through Riverside's small community quickly. Reactions were mixed. Some people, particularly older residents who remembered their own military service, congratulated her and wished her well. Others, including several teachers and her guidance counselor, seemed puzzled by her choice. "You could get scholarships," her English teacher said. "Your writing is excellent, your grades are strong. The military seems like such a drastic step." Maya tried to explain that it wasn't drastic. It was the first decision she had ever made that felt right. But she could see in their faces that they didn't understand. To them, she was making a mistake, throwing away her potential instead of realizing it. Her parents eventually accepted her decision, though they never embraced it. Her mother worried constantly about the dangers of military life, reading every news story about soldiers injured or killed overseas. Her father seemed disappointed that Maya hadn't chosen a more traditional path, like Priya had. Priya herself called a week after Maya's MEPS appointment, having heard the news from their parents. "The Army," Priya said, her voice incredulous. "Maya, what are you thinking? You hate crowds, you don't like conflict, you've never even been in a fight. How are you going to survive basic training?" "I don't know," Maya admitted. "But I have to try. There are other ways to find yourself," Priya said. "You could move to the city, get a job, take some classes. You don't have to do something this extreme." But Maya had tried being invisible in Riverside. She wasn't interested in being invisible somewhere else. The military offered something different, the chance to prove herself, to be part of something bigger, to finally matter to someone. As graduation approached, Maya watched her classmates make their various plans. Some were heading to college, others to local jobs or gap years. A few were getting married or moving away with family. Maya was the only one enlisting, which somehow felt appropriate. She had always been different from them, and now she was taking a different path entirely. The graduation ceremony itself was a blur of forced smiles and empty congratulations. Maya walked across the stage to receive her diploma, hearing polite applause from the sparse crowd. Her parents were there, looking proud, but worried. Mrs. Chun had closed the store early to attend, beaming at Maya from the audience. Afterward, at the small reception, Maya stood alone by the refreshment table and watched her classmates take pictures with friends and family. She felt the familiar sensation of being invisible in a crowd, but this time it didn't hurt as much. In 3 months, she would be someone completely different. She would be a soldier. "Maya Singh," a voice said behind her. She turned to see James Morrison, a boy from her chemistry class. They had been lab partners once, working together in awkward silence for an entire semester. Maya was surprised he remembered her name. "I heard you enlisted," he said, holding a cup of punch. "That's really cool. I always thought about it, but I'm not brave enough." Brave. Another word Maya had never associated with herself. But maybe courage wasn't about not being afraid. Maybe it was about being terrified and doing it anyway. "Good luck," James said. I hope you find what you're looking for." Maya thanked him, touched by the unexpected kindness. As she looked around the room one more time, she realized she wasn't going to miss this place or these people. She was ready for whatever came next. The summer passed quickly. Maya worked extra shifts at the store to save money and spent her free time preparing for basic training. She ran every morning, gradually building up her endurance. She read everything she could about Army life and military customs. She practiced making her bed with hospital corners and learned to shine her old dress shoes until they gleamed. Most importantly, she tried to imagine herself as someone different. Not Maya, the invisible girl from Riverside, but someone new, someone strong, capable, and confident. Someone who belonged somewhere and mattered to the people around her. 3 days before her departure, Maya cleaned out her childhood bedroom. She packed 1 box of belongings to ship to herself after basic training and gave away most of her civilian clothes. The notebooks full of her drawings and stories went into the box, along with her favorite books and a few photographs. Her parents drove her to the processing station on the morning of her departure. The silence in the car was heavy with unspoken words. At the station, surrounded by other new recruits and their families, Maya hugged her parents goodbye. "Stay safe," her mother whispered, tears in her eyes. "Make us proud," her father added, his voice gruff with emotion. Maya promised she would try to do both. As the bus pulled away from the station, carrying her toward basic training and an uncertain future, Maya Singh closed her eyes and tried to imagine the person she was about to become. For the first time in her life, she was excited to find out. The bus rolled through the gates of Fort Benning at 0300 hours, and Maya's new life began with the sound of drill sergeants shouting. The 43 other recruits on the bus represented every corner of America. Farm kids from Iowa, city teenagers from Detroit, college dropouts from California, and everything in between. Maya sat quietly in her assigned seat, watching the dark landscape of the military base roll past the windows. "Welcome to Fort Benning." The drill sergeant who boarded the bus had a voice that could wake the dead. "You have 30 seconds to get off this bus and form up on the yellow footprints. Move, move, move." The next few hours were a controlled chaos of in-processing, uniform issue, and medical checks. Maya moved through each station like she was watching someone else's life unfold. She received her dog tags, her initial uniform issue, and her first military identification card. For the first time, she had an official identity that belonged entirely to her, Private Maya Singh, U.S. Army. The barracks were stark and institutional, with rows of metal bunk beds and wall lockers. Maya was assigned a bottom bunk and a footlocker for her personal belongings. Her bunkmate was a girl named Jessica Torres from Phoenix, who talked constantly and seemed immune to the stress that was making everyone else jumpy. "I can't believe we're actually here," Jessica said as they made their beds with the regulation sheets they'd been issued. "My whole family thought I was crazy for enlisting. What about you? What made you join?" Maya considered the question while she struggled with the fitted sheet. "I wanted to do something that mattered," she said finally. It was the truth, but not the whole truth. She couldn't explain to this talkative stranger that she had joined the Army because she was tired of being invisible, tired of living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She couldn't say that she was here because she needed to find out if Maya Singh was capable of more than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. The first weeks of basic training were the hardest thing Maya had ever experienced. The drill sergeants seemed to take special pleasure in pushing the quiet recruits, as if they could sense weakness and vulnerability from across a crowded formation. Maya struggled with the physical training, gasped through morning runs, and fought tears during particularly brutal punishment sessions. Drill Sergeant Washington was particularly hard on Maya. She was a compact woman with stern eyes and a voice that could cut through steel. During inspections, she always found something wrong with Maya's gear, her appearance, or her performance. "Sing," she would bark. "What kind of soldier are you going to be if you can't even keep your weapon clean? How are you going to protect your battle buddies if you can't keep up on a 5-mile run?" Maya wanted to explain that she was trying, that she had never been athletic, that she was doing her best to keep up. But explanations weren't welcome in basic training. The only acceptable response was, "Yes, drill sergeant," and a renewed effort to do better. Slowly, painfully, Maya began to change. Her body adapted to the physical demands, muscles developing where she had never had them before. She learned to disassemble and clean her rifle in record time, to navigate obstacle courses, to march in formation for miles without faltering. More importantly, she began to understand what the drill sergeants were actually teaching them. They weren't just learning to be soldiers. They were learning to trust each other, to work as a team, to push beyond what they thought they were capable of. When one person struggled, the whole unit struggled together. When someone succeeded, everyone benefited. Maya found herself paired with Rodriguez, a quiet boy from New Mexico who reminded her of herself in many ways. During buddy team exercises, they learned to communicate without words, to anticipate each other's movements, to cover each other's weaknesses. For the first time in her life, Maya experienced what it felt like to have someone depend on her completely. The mental challenges were as demanding as the physical ones. Maya excelled in the classroom portions of training, absorbing information about military history, tactics, and procedures with the same intensity she had once applied to library books. She learned about leadership principles, military law, and the code of conduct that governs soldiers' behavior. But it was during the field exercises that Maya truly began to transform. Away from the barracks and parade grounds, living in the woods with minimal equipment, she discovered reserves of strength and determination she hadn't known existed. She learned to function on little sleep, to think clearly under pressure, to make decisions that affected her entire squad. One night, during a navigation exercise, Maya's team became lost in the dense Georgia woods. Their compass had malfunctioned, and they were miles from their designated checkpoint with dawn approaching. While the other members of her team began to panic, Maya studied their map by flashlight, calculating distances and angles. "This way," she said quietly, pointing toward what looked like impenetrable forest. "Are you sure?" asked Martinez, the appointed team leader who had been struggling with the responsibility. Maya looked at the map again, then at the stars visible through the canopy. She thought about all the times she had felt lost in her old life, all the moments when she had wished someone would show her the way forward. "I'm sure," she said. They reached their checkpoint with minutes to spare, and Maya felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time, people had looked to her for answers, and she had been able to provide them. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was essential. Drill Sergeant Washington noticed the change too. During a particularly challenging live-fire exercise, Maya's squad was tasked with advancing on a target while under simulated enemy fire. Maya found herself naturally taking point, directing her team's movement with hand signals, identifying threats and opportunities with an analytical precision that surprised everyone, including herself. "Sing," Washington called after the exercise. "Walk with me." They moved away from the other recruits, and Maya braced herself for another lecture about her performance. Instead, Washington studied her with thoughtful eyes. "You're different from when you got here," she said. "Stronger, more confident. But there's something else. You see things other people miss, don't you? You notice details, patterns, problems before they become critical." Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "That's a valuable skill in a soldier," Washington continued. "In the intelligence field, especially. I've seen your test scores, your evaluations. You're going to do well in your advanced training." It was the closest thing to praise Maya had ever received from any drill sergeant, and it meant more to her than any grade or compliment from her civilian life. Graduation from basic training felt surreal. Maya stood in formation with her fellow soldiers. Not recruits anymore, but soldiers wearing dress uniforms that actually fit her transformed body. Her parents had made the trip from Riverside, looking proud but slightly bewildered by the confident young woman who had replaced their quiet daughter. "You look different," her mother said during the brief family time they were allowed after the ceremony. "I feel different," Maya replied. It was true. The girl who had left Riverside 3 months ago might as well have been a different person. Maya Singh was still quiet and analytical, but now those traits felt like strengths rather than weaknesses. She had learned to trust her instincts, to to speak up when she had something valuable to contribute, to lead when leadership was needed. Her advanced individual training for military intelligence was conducted at Fort Huachuca in Arizona. The desert landscape was a stark contrast to the forests of Fort Benning, but Maya found herself adapting quickly to each new environment. She was learning that adaptability was one of her strongest assets. The intelligence training was intellectually demanding in ways that reminded Maya of her favorite library books, but with real-world applications that made every lesson feel urgent and important. She learned about signals interception, pattern analysis, threat assessment, and the delicate art of turning raw data into actionable intelligence. Her instructors quickly recognized her analytical abilities. Staff Sergeant Kim, who taught strategic analysis, often used Maya's work as examples for the rest of the class. Captain Valdez, who oversaw the communications intercept training, recommended Maya for advanced courses that were usually reserved for soldiers with several years of experience. "You have a natural aptitude for this work," Valdez told her during a performance review. "You see connections other people miss, patterns that aren't obvious. That's not something we can teach. It's something you either have or you don't." Maya threw herself into her studies with the same intensity she had once applied to disappearing into library books. But now, instead of escaping from her life, she was building a new one. She learned multiple computer programming languages, studied foreign communication patterns, and mastered the complex software used to analyze intercepted signals. Her classmates began to seek her out for help with difficult assignments, and Maya found herself naturally falling into a mentoring role. She remembered what it felt like to struggle alone, so she made herself available to anyone who needed assistance. Slowly, she began to develop real friendships for the first time in her life. Maria Santos was a communications specialist from Texas who had also been quiet and overlooked in her civilian life. She and Maya bonded over late-night study sessions and their shared experience of feeling like outsiders who had finally found their place. "You know what's funny?" Maria said one evening as they reviewed signal analysis procedures. "Back home, I used to think there was something wrong with me because I didn't fit in. Now I realize I just hadn't found the right place to fit." David Chun, no relation to Mrs. Chun from the grocery store, was a computer specialist whose analytical mind complemented Maya's pattern recognition skills perfectly. Together, they developed innovative approaches to data analysis that impressed their instructors and earned them both recommendations for specialized assignments after graduation. The transformation wasn't just professional. Maya began to understand herself in new ways, recognizing that many of the qualities that had made her feel like an outsider in civilian life were actually valuable assets in military intelligence. Her tendency to observe rather than participate, her analytical nature, her ability to remain calm under pressure, all of these traits serve her well in her new career. She also discovered physical capabilities she had never known she possessed. The regular training and physical fitness requirements had transformed her body, but more importantly, they had changed her relationship with physical challenges. She no longer saw herself as weak or incapable. She had learned to push through discomfort and fatigue to achieve her goals. 6 months into her training, Maya received news that would change her trajectory once again. Captain Valdez called her into his office for what she assumed would be a routine progress review. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with a colonel she had never seen before. Colonel James Morrison was a distinguished man in his 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore the insignia of military intelligence, and something about his presence commanded immediate respect. "Private Singh," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I've been reviewing your file, your test scores, your instructor evaluations. Quite impressive." Maya sat at attention, unsure how to respond. "I'm here because we have a special opportunity," Morrison continued. "A new program that requires soldiers with exceptional analytical abilities and the mental flexibility to adapt to rapidly changing situations. It's challenging work, often dangerous, and it would require additional security clearances and training." He paused, studying Maya's reaction. I want to know if you're interested in becoming more than just another intelligence analyst. I want to know if you're ready to become someone truly exceptional. Maya thought about the girl who had walked into the recruitment office less than a year ago, terrified and invisible and desperate for a chance to matter. That girl would have been too frightened to even consider such an opportunity. But that girl no longer existed. In her place sat Specialist Maya Singh, a soldier who had discovered capabilities she never knew she possessed, who had earned the respect of her instructors and peers, who had finally found a place where her unique qualities were valued rather than overlooked. Yes, sir, Maya said without hesitation. I'm interested. Morrison smiled, and Maya caught a glimpse of the person behind the military bearing, someone who understood what it was like to see potential in unexpected places. Outstanding, he said. Welcome to the Black Viper program, Specialist Singh. Your real training is about to begin. Maya left that meeting with her head spinning and her heart racing. She didn't know exactly what the Black Viper program entailed, but she knew it represented everything she had been hoping for when she first decided to enlist. A chance to prove herself, to make a real difference, to become someone who truly mattered. That night, she called her parents for the first time in months. The conversation was brief, but warmer than their interactions had been in years. She told them about her promotion to specialist, about her excellent performance reviews, about the new opportunities that were opening up for her. We're proud of you, her father said, and Maya could hear the surprise in his own voice, as if he was just now realizing that his invisible daughter had become someone remarkable. After hanging up, Maya sat in her barracks room and reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. A year ago, she had been a ghost haunting the hallways of her high school, unnoticed and unremarkable. Now she was about to embark on specialized training that could lead to assignments around the world, work that could impact national security, a career that would challenge every aspect of her intelligence and dedication. Maya Singh was no longer invisible. Colonel Morrison had seen her, really seen her, in a way that felt different from the casual recognition of instructors or peers. He had looked at her file and seen potential for something extraordinary. For the first time in her life, Maya was excited to find out what that something might be. The Black Viper program was about to begin, and with it, the next chapter of her transformation from overlooked teenager to exceptional soldier. She was ready to discover just how far Maya Singh could go when someone finally recognized who she really was. The Black Viper facility was hidden deep within Fort Gordon, Georgia, accessible only through a series of security checkpoints that required increasingly specialized clearances. Maya arrived on a Monday morning in November, carrying a single duffel bag and orders that told her almost nothing about what she would be doing for the next 18 months. The compound looked unremarkable from the outside, a collection of low concrete buildings surrounded by high fences and security cameras. But as Maya was escorted through the entrance by a stern-faced MP, she sensed that she was entering a different world entirely, one where the rules and expectations would be unlike anything she had experienced before. Colonel Morrison met her in the main briefing room, which was filled with computer terminals, wall-mounted displays showing maps and data feeds, and equipment Maya didn't recognize. 5 other soldiers sat at a conference table, all of them older and more experienced than Maya. She felt a familiar flutter of nervousness, the old instinct to make herself small and invisible. "Gentlemen, this is Specialist Singh," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "The final member of your team." Maya studied her new teammates as Morrison made introductions. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez was a communications specialist with 15 years of experience and a reputation for being able to intercept signals that other technicians couldn't even detect. Staff Sergeant Williams was a former Special Forces operator who had transitioned into intelligence work after an injury ended his combat career. Sergeant Martinez was a language specialist who spoke 7 languages fluently and could understand fragments of a dozen more. The other 2 team members were closer to Maya's age, but had years more experience. Specialist Jackson was a computer programmer who had developed innovative software for data analysis before being recruited for Black Viper. Specialist Foster was a former Marine who had been transferred to the Army specifically for this program. Maya was the youngest, the least experienced, and the only woman on the team. As the introductions concluded, she wondered what Colonel Morrison had seen in her file that convinced him she belonged with these obviously exceptional soldiers. Black Viper is an experimental program. Morrison began, activating a wall display that showed a complex organizational chart. We combine traditional intelligence analysis with advanced technological capabilities and real-time operational support. Your team will be responsible for providing critical intelligence to special operations units deployed around the world. The scope of the mission was larger than anything Maya had imagined. They would be analyzing intercepted communications, tracking terrorist networks, identifying threats before they materialized into attacks, and providing intelligence that could save the lives of soldiers in active combat zones. The work is classified at the highest levels, Morrison continued. You will have access to information that could compromise national security if it fell into the wrong hands. You will see things that will challenge your assumptions about the world and your country's place in it. And you will be required to make decisions that could have far-reaching consequences. He paused, looking at each team member individually. This is not a job for everyone. The training is intensive, the hours are unpredictable, and the stress can be overwhelming. If anyone has doubts about their commitment or their ability to handle this responsibility, now is the time to speak up. Maya felt the familiar weight of self-doubt pressing down on her shoulders. She was surrounded by soldiers with years of experience, advanced degrees, and proven track records. What made her think she could keep up with them, let alone contribute meaningfully to their work? But then she remembered the navigation exercise during basic training, the moment when her teammates had looked to her for guidance, and she had been able to provide it. She thought about her instructor evaluations, the patterns she had learned to recognize, the analytical skills that had developed over months of intensive training. Maya Singh was no longer the invisible girl from Riverside. She was here because Colonel Morrison believed she belonged here, and she was beginning to believe it too. The first phase of Black Viper training lasted 3 months and was unlike anything Maya had experienced before. Days began at 0500 with physical training that made basic training look easy. They ran obstacle courses while carrying full gear, practiced hand-to-hand combat, and learned advanced weapons handling that went far beyond basic rifle marksmanship. But the real challenges were mental. Maya found herself immersed in advanced courses on cryptography, behavioral analysis, strategic planning, and technological surveillance. She learned to operate equipment that could intercept satellite communications, decode encrypted messages, and track individuals across continents using digital breadcrumbs they didn't even know they were leaving. The work was intellectually demanding, but also deeply satisfying. Maya discovered that her mind was perfectly suited for the complex pattern recognition that intelligence work required. She could look at seemingly random data and identify connections that pointed toward important conclusions. She could analyze communication patterns and predict likely behaviors or threats. Her teammates gradually began to recognize her capabilities. During a simulated crisis exercise, Maya was the first to identify a pattern in intercepted communications that indicated a planned attack on American forces overseas. Her analysis allowed the team to provide early warning that potentially saved dozens of lives in the simulation. "How did you see that?" Sergeant Martinez asked afterward, studying the data that Maya had analyzed. "The frequency of communications increased by 37% over 3 days," Maya explained. "But more importantly, the pattern of contact shifted. People who normally communicated through intermediaries started talking directly to each other. It suggested coordination for something time-sensitive." Rodriguez nodded appreciatively. "I've been doing signals intelligence for 15 years, and I missed that completely." "Good catch, Singh." The recognition felt different from the praise she had received during her earlier training. These were experienced professionals who understood the complexities of intelligence work, and they were acknowledging her as an equal. Maya began to feel like she truly belonged on the team. Colonel Morrison took a personal interest in Maya's development, meeting with her weekly to discuss her progress and provide additional challenges. During one of these sessions, he shared something about his own background that helped Maya understand why he had selected her for the program. "I was overlooked early in my career," he said, reviewing Maya's latest performance evaluations. "I was quiet, analytical, not what most people pictured when they thought of a military leader. My supervisors saw me as a competent analyst, but nothing special. It took years before someone recognized that my way of thinking was actually an asset rather than a limitation." Maya listened carefully, sensing that Morrison was sharing something important. "The best intelligence officers aren't necessarily the most obvious choices," he continued. "They're the people who see things differently, who notice details other people miss, who can think outside conventional patterns. You have that gift," specialists sing. "But more importantly, you have the work ethic and integrity to use it responsibly." The conversation marked a turning point in Maya's confidence. She began to speak up more during team meetings, to offer suggestions and alternative perspectives, to trust her analytical instincts even when they contradicted more experienced opinions. Her breakthrough moment came during a real-world crisis. A group of American diplomats had been taken hostage in a small African nation, and the Black Viper team was tasked with providing intelligence support for a rescue operation. Maya found herself assigned to analyze the communications patterns of the terrorist group responsible for the kidnapping. For 3 days, she pored over intercepted phone calls, text messages, and radio transmissions, looking for clues about where the hostages were being held and how they might be rescued. The data was fragmentary and often contradictory, painted a confusing picture of a complex situation. But on the third night, working alone in the operations center while her teammates slept, Maya noticed something that changed everything. Hidden in the metadata of seemingly routine communications was a pattern that revealed the location of a secret meeting between the terrorist leaders and their government contacts. "Colonel," she said, calling Morrison despite the late hour, "I think I found something." Morrison arrived within minutes, followed quickly by the rest of the team. Maya walked them through her analysis, showing how careful examination of communication timing and routing had revealed information that wasn't visible in the content of the messages themselves. "If they're meeting here," she said, pointing to a location on a digital map, "then the hostages are probably being held within a 5-mile radius. The timing of the communications suggests they're moving them every 12 hours, but always returning to this general area." The intelligence Maya provided was passed to the Special Operations Team preparing for the rescue mission. 18 hours later, all the hostages were recovered safely, and the terrorist leaders were captured during their secret meeting. Colonel Morrison called Maya into his office the day after the successful operation. On his desk was a set of orders promoting her to sergeant and assigning her to lead a new analytical team within the Black Viper program. "This is highly unusual," he said, gesturing to the promotion orders. "Specialists don't normally become team leaders within their first year of assignment. But your performance during the hostage crisis demonstrated leadership capabilities that can't be ignored." Maya stared at the orders, hardly believing what she was seeing. A year and a half ago, she had been invisible in her high school hallways. Now she was being entrusted with leading other soldiers in work that could impact national security. "I want you to understand what this means," Morrison continued. "You'll be responsible for training new team members, developing analytical protocols, and representing the program in briefings with senior officials. It's a significant responsibility." "I understand, sir," Maya said, though she wasn't entirely sure she did. "Do you remember our first meeting?" Morrison asked, "when I told you I was looking for someone exceptional?" Maya nodded. "I've seen a lot of soldiers in my career," specialists sing. "I've worked with generals and special forces operators and brilliant analysts. But it's rare to find someone who combines analytical brilliance with genuine humility and the ability to inspire confidence in others. That's what makes you exceptional. The promotion ceremony was small, but meaningful. Maya's parents flew in from Riverside, along with Mrs. Chun, who had closed her store for the day, to attend. Priya even made the trip from her graduate program, looking genuinely proud of her younger sister for the first time Maya could remember. "I hardly recognize you," Priya said during the reception afterward. "You seem so confident, so sure of yourself." "I feel like myself for the first time," Maya replied. "It just took me a while to figure out who that was." Her parents struggled to fully understand Maya's work. The classified nature of her assignments meant she couldn't share many details, but they could see the change in their daughter. The quiet, invisible girl had been replaced by a poised professional who commanded respect from her colleagues and superiors. "We're proud of you," her mother said, tears in her eyes. "I know we didn't always understand your decision to enlist, but we can see now that it was the right choice." Mrs. Chun pulled Maya aside during the reception, her weathered hands gripping Maya's shoulders with surprising strength. "I told you that you were strong," she said in her accented English. "I could see it even when you couldn't. Now the whole world can see it too." As Maya's first year as a team leader progressed, she found herself facing new challenges that tested her leadership abilities as much as her analytical skills. She was responsible for training new team members, including several experienced soldiers who initially resented taking direction from someone so young and relatively inexperienced. But Maya's approach to leadership was different from what most of them expected. Instead of relying on rank or authority, she led by example, demonstrating her analytical capabilities and teaching others to develop their own skills. She remembered what it felt like to be overlooked and underestimated, so she made sure everyone on her team felt valued and heard. One of her new team members was Staff Sergeant Jennifer Park, a former Air Force intelligence analyst who had requested a transfer to the Black Viper program. Park was older than Maya, with more years of service and advanced degrees in computer science and international relations. Initially, Park seemed skeptical of Maya's leadership, questioning her decisions and challenging her analytical methods during team meetings. Maya recognized the behavior. It was a test, the same kind of probing that had once made her retreat into invisibility. But Maya Singh was no longer the girl who hid from conflict. During a private meeting, she addressed Park's concerns directly. "I understand you have reservations about my leadership," Maya said, her voice calm but firm. "You have more experience and education than I do, and in many ways you're more qualified for this position than I am. But I'm here because I've proven that I can see patterns and connections that other people miss, and because I can help other people develop those same capabilities." Park listened without interrupting, her expression neutral. "I'm not asking you to follow me blindly," Maya continued. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that we can accomplish more working together than we could individually. If I'm wrong, you'll be the first to know it." The conversation marked the beginning of a productive working relationship that eventually developed into mutual respect. Park's technical expertise complemented Maya's pattern recognition abilities perfectly, and together they developed new analytical techniques that were eventually adopted by intelligence units across the military. Maya's reputation within the intelligence community continued to grow. She was invited to brief senior officials at the Pentagon, to consult on major operations, and to speak at professional conferences about innovative analytical techniques. Each success brought new opportunities and greater responsibilities. But the recognition that meant the most came from an unexpected source. During a visit to the Black Viper facility, the commanding general of military intelligence asked to meet with Maya personally. General Patricia Hamilton was a legend in the intelligence community, a woman who had broken barriers and achieved success in a male-dominated field. "Sergeant Singh," General Hamilton said during their private meeting, "I've been following your career with great interest. Your work on the hostage rescue operation, your innovations in pattern analysis, your success as a team leader, all of it represents exactly the kind of thinking we need more of in our intelligence operations." Maya listened, still somewhat amazed that she was sitting across from one of the most senior officers in the Army. "I want to discuss your future," Hamilton continued. "There are opportunities available for officers with your capabilities, advanced training, specialized assignments, eventually command positions that could put you in charge of major intelligence operations." The conversation lasted for over an hour, covering Maya's career goals, her interest in additional education, and the various paths available for advancement. When it ended, Maya had a clear understanding of how her career might develop over the coming years. That evening, Maya sat in her quarters and reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about the girl who had walked into the recruitment office 3 years ago, desperate for a chance to matter to someone. That girl could never have imagined the conversation she had just had with General Hamilton, could never have pictured herself as a leader in one of the military's most important missions. She pulled out her phone and called her parents, something she now did regularly. The conversations were different now, warmer, more substantive, filled with mutual respect and genuine affection. "How are you doing, Beta?" her mother asked, using the term of endearment she had rarely used when Maya was younger. "I'm doing well, Mom," Maya replied. "Really well. Better than I ever thought possible." They talked for nearly an hour about Maya's work, what she could share of it, about her plans for the future, about the family back home. Her parents asked questions about her life and opinions, treating her as an adult whose thoughts and experiences mattered to them. After hanging up, Maya walked outside and looked up at the stars visible above the base. She thought about all the people who had helped her reach this point. Colonel Morrison, who had seen potential where others saw only mediocrity, her drill sergeants, who had pushed her beyond what she thought she could endure, her teammates, who had accepted her as an equal and a leader, General Hamilton, who was helping her envision a future she had never dared to imagine. But most importantly, Maya thought about herself, about the courage it had taken to walk into that recruitment office, to survive basic training, to accept challenges that terrified her, to lead others despite her own doubts. She had transformed from someone who was invisible to everyone, including herself, into someone who was recognized as exceptional by the people who mattered most. Maya Singh was no longer the overlooked girl from Riverside. She was Sergeant Singh, team leader in the Black Viper program, rising star in the intelligence community, and someone who had finally learned to see herself the way Colonel Morrison had seen her from the beginning, as someone extraordinary who just needed the right opportunity to shine. Standing under the stars, Maya felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment, and excitement for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. She had found her place in the world, discovered her purpose, and learned that being different wasn't a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be celebrated. For the first time in her life, Maya Singh was exactly where she belonged, doing work that mattered, surrounded by people who valued her contributions. She was visible, respected, and essential. She was home.